Hi everyone. I hope you can see the slides that I am sharing. Great, thank you. I'm leaving them in this format. It's simply because part of this session I'm going to be showing you how to access where things are. So I need to be able to have access to the top sections of the ribbon that were in PowerPoint. So my name is Anwen Vickers and I work in the equality team for West Yorkshire ICB. I am someone with lived experience of disability. I use assistive software to enable me to access information. So I have a personal interest in removing barriers because I experience those barriers on a daily basis. I'm also Deputy Chair of our Disability and Long-Term Condition Network, SAF network for the West Yorkshire ICB. I'm really passionate about making sure that information is accessible. I work in the equality team, but I also used to work in involvement and engagement, making sure that the information that we shared with our communities was accessible so that they could participate and be involved in the work that we were doing. So I will go through these slides. And I may, dependent on time, also flip to a Word document that I use for training purposes, just to explain where certain things are as I'm going along. I'm sure you may have some questions for me at the end. Normally, I get them during the session. So I'm just going to go along and start these slides. So it's really important, if you are going to make information accessible, that you use the tools that will help you. So if you're using Microsoft Word, which is one of the main pieces of software that we use Microsoft Office within the ICB, is use things like the Microsoft Editor. Now, the editor tool that can be found in your Home and Review tab of the Word ribbon supplies readability statistics, it suggests how to improve your writing style, and it checks your spelling and grammar. This is a really useful tool. The readability statistics is particularly helpful because what it does is it gives you a grading as to how readable your document is. It gives it an American grading, so ideally what you would want is a grade 6 for general public or lower, and for more formal documents you're looking for grade 7 or grade 8. It looks at things like how many paragraphs you use, how many words you use in a sentence, the style of the language that you use, the words that you use, all of these things, and then it gives you a score. It's really helpful. It also has the editor tool has the option to make your text, check your text for things to see if it's whether you want it in a formal or a professional style or a casual style. Now, casual is really good for making information more accessible for general public and just more usable. The grammar tool, really helpful. I don't know about you, but I sometimes will use really long words or make my sentences too long, and this will tell you if that's the case and give you suggestions. There's also the accessibility checker, which is found in the review tab of the Word ribbon. This finds key accessibility issues and suggests how to fix them. In PowerPoint, it's exactly the same, and in Excel, you can go to the review bar, check accessibility, and then on the right-hand side, what you will find are a list of like here it's given me that I've used merged or split cells in a table. on purpose, of course, to show that there is an accessibility issue. It will show me here that I need to check the reading order, which is the structure of my slide, and make sure that it's reading in the right order for assistive software to check. In Word, it will give you things like whether your document is structured, whether there are issues around colour usage, images, all of these sort of things, and then it will give you suggestions on how to fix them. It is a really useful tool. It doesn't check for everything. You still need to use your own abilities, but it will give you a really good clue as to whether your information is accessible. Now, if you don't use Word or Office, there are similar tools within both Google Docs. I think there's an extension that you can add called Grackle. Foxit has accessibility checkers as well. So there are, and I'm sure there are the same elements within Apple. There are a variety of different softwares that will do the same thing. I talk about the accessibility checker in Word because that's what we use in our organisation. There's also the Snip and Sketch tool. The Snip and Sketch tool that I recommend people using is really important because the Snip and Sketch tool takes a screenshot of images. Now, lots of people don't realise that images like charts and graphs contain background formatting that cause problems for assistive software. If somebody shares a flowchart that hasn't been turned into an image, what I will get on my assistive software is a list of things like box, arrow, arrow, box, box, arrow. It won't tell me what's in that flowchart. If that flowchart is saved using the Snip and Sketch tool, what it will do is save it as an image without any background formatting, and then someone can add a description underneath detailing what that flowchart is going to tell me about. And somebody might also add some alternative text, which I will explain. Alternative text is a description that you add to an image, and this will get read out by assistive software detailing what's in the image. You have to add it in, and I will show you how to do that shortly. So the Snip and Sketch tool is really easy to find. There will be similar snipping tools, screenshot tools in other software that you can use if you don't use Office. In Word or in any document software that you use, it's really important that you use heading styles. So in Word, it's found in the Style tabs in the Word ribbon. These clearly set out the layout and structure of the document. This is important so that documents, when a PDF is generated, and table of contents work properly. So if you weren't aware, if you don't have structured formatted headings in a document using that sort of formatting function, assistive software doesn't know which way to follow your document. It needs those instructions in place for it to be able to read and know where to start, where to go to the middle, and where to go to the end. This is particularly important if you're going to save it to a PDF, because what happens if you don't do that is assistive software will randomly read out in a non-logical order. I've had documents that either read as blank, so they are just seen as an image, which is no help for my software, or what it will do is randomly read the bottom of the document, then it might skip to a paragraph in the middle, go back to the bottom, and then go up to the top. It's because it's got no rules in place for it to know where to go from top down to the middle and then to the bottom of your document. So it's really important that you use headings in a logical and chronological order. So you would only normally use one heading one, and that will set out the title of your document, usually on the first part of your page, the first page. Heading 2 should be used in the main section of your document. So you can have as many heading 2s as you like, because they're the sections, the chapters of your document. And a heading 3 would be the subsection of any of your heading 2s. So you can have as many heading 3s within the, and then heading 4 should be a subsection of your heading 3. So they're quite an easy format to use. Once you've got them inbuilt as a template in your document, that will enable assistive software to read your document. In PowerPoint, we don't have quite the same tools, but we still have structure. So in PowerPoint, you need to make sure you use a title. This is the title for each slide. Each slide title needs to be unique. You can't have the same name for your slide title. This is because assistive software, particularly things like screen readers, reads things in list format. It creates lists for the user who's listening to that information to make choices so that they can access that information. If you have something with the same name, assistive software will just can't make a choice between those two. And the user who's listening equally just thinks there's a duplicate, so they can't make that choice either. So one of the things that you could do is if you've got something like a continuation, then I might say if I have structure your content here in my title, I might just put in brackets continued for the next section if it's, or structure your content 1, structure your content 2. They're the same, just same names, but just give something to enable someone who's listening to that information to know that they're different. You need to remember to use your layout. So your layout, if people aren't familiar with the PowerPoint slides, your layout is this. It gives instructions for the software for particular placeholders and sections so that assistive software knows whether it's reading. So these dotted lines are a placeholder. So assistive software knows to go to the title and then it knows to go to the placeholder. If you have slides without placeholders, your assistive software that someone's using doesn't know how to read those. The problem is as well is that if you then save this to a PDF and you haven't got your placeholders in place, then you haven't got your title in place, again, it won't be transferred over into the PDF and it will read blank. So the software won't, assistive software won't be able to use your PDF. It's really important that if you've got a long document, 6 pages to 9 pages long, make sure that you have put in an inbuilt table of contents into the Word document. This is found in the References tab of the Word ribbon. Remember, there should be no content in your headers or footers apart from page numbers, and avoid using footnotes. So the reason that we need to make sure there's nothing in your footer or header is it doesn't get read out by assistive software. If it's important, it won't be read by assistive software. It only reads the stuff that's in the main body of your document unless you've gone through some painstaking other formatting. So page numbers it will automatically register with, but if you put anything else in your header or footer, it's not going to be read out. So when I create documents and I have something like a logo, if I want to make sure it's going to be read out, I make sure it's in the main body of my document and not in my header. If I were to put something in that header like a banner, then I would need to include some text in my main body of the document to make it really clear who it belongs to. However, if you have, and some people do, a load of logos that you want to put in or something in your header or footer, you can do, because they won't get read out. So it might be that you're just adding them for design purposes, but you've got at the end of the document or the beginning of a document who those key people or key organizations are, and that's fine. But it's just try and keep them clear if you can. Footnotes are a problem for accessibility, so I would always avoid using footnotes where you can. They won't get read out by assistive software and they cause a lot of problems. Be mindful of colour. It's important to think about colour contrast because it can affect the ability to access information. Colours which are too light against a light background or too dark against a dark background make text more difficult to read. This is an example of poor colour contrast. This is a web pages. The image on the left has got very light text with a light background, making it really hard for people to be able to see. And on the right side, there's a banking image from a banking website that shows a very busy background with very light text, making it harder to bring out. The solutions for both of these would have been have a stronger colour contrast to enable the text to be more legible. Nothing should be indicated by colour alone. It's very important not to rely on using colour as the only way to provide information. There must be a secondary way for the information to be understood. For example, quite a lot of the time organisations use the RAG rating tool, red, amber, green, to indicate progress in action plans. So red might signify that something's not going too well, amber that there's some progress, and green that things are complete or working well. The problem is if you can't see those colours or recognise them, you wouldn't be able to work out what the information is telling you. And unfortunately, assistive software like screen readers don't go, oh, this is a red section, this is a green section, the text is yellow. It doesn't give you that information. It is very literal. It just reads out what is provided. So I've put an example here of a table, an action plan that actually provides a solution. So you'll note that this table is an accessible one. It has equal number of columns, rows, columns. There's no empty spaces, empty cells. Each the column has a title to it, and on the fifth column along in the progress section it says complete, and then in brackets it says green, and that cell is coloured green. The idea is that the green signifies that it's complete. The complete tells someone who can't see the colour that it's complete. And if someone in general is having a conversation and somebody in the meeting goes, oh, yes, we can agree this section is green, the person who can't see the green or tell that it's green has got that information. Got the same underneath in progress, because that's what the colour amber is. The colour yellow that's been used for amber is signifying. If you turn this into grayscale, and in the old days, and sometimes this still happens, if somebody printed this out on a non-colour printer in grayscale, you would know what those colours signify. It's a simple, quick fix, and it means everyone's needs. No one gets left behind. Use accessible fonts. Now, in the ICB, we recommend using the Arial. It's actually the NHS's second recommended accessible font, and it's recognised as part of ClearPrint guidelines by worldwide, and in the UK. That doesn't mean you can't use other sans serif fonts, which are regarded as being more accessible. Please note that some people might require different fonts for access reasons, and it's perfectly reasonable for them to say, can you provide me with something that's in a different font? For example, I find Arial really easy to see because of my visual impairment, but I have a colleague who has a visual impairment as well, and they find that Helvetica is actually easier for them, or Tahoma. These are again recommended fonts because they're sans serif. There are some specific fonts that particularly help people with dyslexia. And again, if somebody requests that, then I would always say you can change your content to meet the needs of those who need that. The minimum accessible size for font is size 12 point. And if I was going to create a PowerPoint, then it needs to be 16 point or 18 point as a minimum, because you need it bigger because it's for presentation purposes. And it's going to be viewed different. If I was creating a poster, then the font size would be bigger, particularly if it was going to be stuck up on a wall. It needs to be larger to enable someone to be able to see it from a distance. Be mindful of colour contrast for text. Blue is fine for hyperlinks, it's what's expected. Always align text to the left and don't use vertical text. Text coming from anything other than horizontal can't be used by assistive software. It works from a strict left to right ability. It's a bit like the printers, old style printers or typewriters. It goes left to right, left to right. Anything that comes in different directions of text, assistive software is just not going to work with. And then you need to make sure that you use good line spacing. Line spacing enables people to read information more clearly. So it's recommended in our organisation to use 1.5 or 1.15 to give good spacing. Does depend on the information that you're creating as well, because too much spacing can equally cause problems for accessible information. And don't justify text. So that just means when we're looking at text, that you look at making sure that your text is raggedy, as we would call it, and not justified, which is where you even them all up and they make everything all together in one, so it looks almost like it's in a column. That's not particularly helpful for a wide range of people. So the idea is that we don't justify text. Do have conversations with people who go, but it looks untidy. Unfortunately, it is more accessible. Ooh, why am I? So this is an example of what happens if we don't use good colour contrast in assistive software, and the impact it has on people using assistive software. So this is the image on your left has got pale pink text, which means that it doesn't have good colour contrast. The project itself was amazing. I'm very clear on the fact that this was a really valuable project. I only use it as an example around colour contrast and the impact it has. On the right is a screenshot of my assistive software that I use sometimes to access text. What it does is change the colour of the text to a contrast that I can read text better. Now, what you will notice is on the left, there is a title, there is a chapter number. Up here, there is a woman's figure with some text, pink text, and then there is a graph with lots of different colours. On the right-hand side of the page, you will see the fact that there is no title, there is no text next to the woman's figure, and half the graph is missing. And that's because what happened is they've used pale pink text on a white background. If they'd used dark text on a light background, this would have meant the assistive software would have picked out the text, enabling it to be seen. This happens quite a lot with when people are using different colors text, because they're not aware that if we use text that is too light or too dark and doesn't have the correct color contrast, it means that it's no longer legible to some people who are using assistive software. This type of software is used a lot by people either with dyslexia or with visual impairment to enable them to read information. And I'm not sure that people are always aware of the impact that it can have if people don't use the right colour contrast. So it's really important when we're we're thinking about creating information, that we also think about the impact. Now, they could have used a pink, but if it had been a much darker pink, it might have then been able to show the colour would have bled through and would have been fine for colour contrast. Now, the good thing is your accessibility checker will tell you if your colour contrast isn't good. It will tell you that you need to change it and provide suggestions. It's equally important that if we have images and tables and diagrams, that we don't rely on them to convey the information that be in the main text. So quite often people will put charts and graphs. I've seen lots of reports where they will be kind of just look at the charts. It's self-explanatory. There's no description, there's no explanation, there's no summary of what are in those charts or graphs for someone who can't access them. And what you need to make a document accessible is some element of description of this chart explains that this is our organizational chart, and it explains who does what in our organization. This graph shows that there are 20% of people like this, 10% of people don't like that. That's all you need to put, but you do need to be able to have that in the main body of the text. And then you also need to make sure that you add alt text for some of the information. Now, alt text is called alternative text. And if I right click on this document here and go view alt text, it says NHS logo, and that's what will be read out to someone using assistive software who uses a screen reader. The thing is, people who use speech to text, text to speech readers like I do, we don't use alt text. What we do is have we can usually, most of us can see some information, but we might have difficulty reading text, or so what happens is we won't get alt text because we don't use a screen reader, so we need some of that information in the main body of the text, and then someone who uses a screen reader will have the extra information, like this is an NHS logo, in the alternative text. The rules around alt text is don't put tons of information in it if you can. The whole point is it's an inclusive document. Most of the information will be in your main body of your text. The extra added bonus of information that's not in your main body of text. So if you had a person, you might provide more description about the person or the activity that somebody was doing. It's all about the context. You will need to add long descriptions in your main text if the image is a flowchart, map or diagram. Maps, not accessible for a wide group of people. They do need more description somewhere. Add alt text to your embedded documents. So sometimes people embed documents in embed one document into another document. Ideally, the most accessible would be to have a hyperlink that takes you to a web page somewhere that has that information. But if that's not going to happen and you're going to embed a document, you need to make sure that you've added alt text, because assistive software won't know that that document is there. So you need to make sure that you've added alt text to say that this is what document it is. And you need to add alt text to QR codes. So QR codes are my sort of kryptonite. I can't use them, and people stick them in, and I have no way of using that, knowing where the event is, what the information is. QR codes are really good for some groups of people. They're not great for people like myself. So add some alt text, because that will explain to someone using assistive software what this QR code is. And then next to that QR code, have a hyperlink so that someone else can access the hyperlink, or a contact number or details so that someone can go and get that extra bit of information that that QR code is sharing. Be careful how you use images. Use images to illustrate your text and not convey new information without explanation. Check your image is not too small to be seen clearly or pixelated by being made too large. Leave a clear gap between image and text. Avoid fitting text around images. It's really helpful to place images at the end of paragraphs, allowing sufficient space between the text and the image. And if you're familiar with Word, set wrapping style to inline with text. Try and avoid, please, placing text over any background image, placing images in text boxes, or placing an image on top of another image, or inserting images of scanned documents containing text, as none of this content will be recognised by screen readers or assistive softwares. What happens is if you place an image on top of an image and another image or all of this, assistive software gets confused because it's trying to read all of the different elements and can't work it out. So what it does is computer says, no, I'm not going to work. So it's really not helpful. Please don't share posters as an image file, a PNG, JPEG, or as a PowerPoint slide because they're not accessible. So images need alt text. If you send me a poster, it doesn't have, as an image, it doesn't have any alt text. It has no structure. I can't change the color contrast. I can't make the text bigger. I have no power over this image. I'm no way. It's like you've sent me something blank. So if you're going to provide posters, make sure that you provide an alternative as an image. If you're going to do it, send me that information from the poster in the email. Send me an alternative in a Word or PDF document that's accessibly formatted. And if you use apps, so some people use things like Canva and other types of apps to create colourful, bright images, please check them with editing software because they may not be structured, even if they say that they have got accessibility tools inbuilt. You will need to double check them because quite often they aren't accessible. I've received numerous posters that have been designed in different apps and actually they don't work with assistive software. So you do need to check them and you do need to use editing software like Adobe Pro. Foxit has some. There's PAC Accessibility Checker, all sorts of editing software that can enable you to double check. I've provided some examples here that text boxes, unfortunately, aren't particularly accessible to assistive software. You may need to add alt text to your text boxes. If you're creating a document, say in Word, you could use the shading tool to shade your text so it appears to look like a text box rather than putting something into a text box, or accessibly format a table, because that would be more accessible than it would be using a text box. You will probably need to add alt text, which repeats the text that you've got in the box. We also have shapes that are used. These are really good for things like presentations, but again, you're going to need to add alt text to this because it's not going to be necessarily read out by assistive software. And I've shared a really inaccessible image here because the text is not got sufficient contrast against a very busy background. As an example, just to remind you of looking at making sure that when we create images, they are accessible images. Make sure that you use an outline, paragraph, or step-by-step list for flowcharts. I've used the reminder here of using the snip and sketch tool to save images, flow diagrams, and charts so that you remove your background formatting. Clearly label graphs and charts. Think about the font size and the color choice. Think about the type of charts or graphs used. Scatter graphs, for example, are really inaccessible. Charts that rely on colour alone to indicate information are not accessible. So when you've got them with little barcode, little keys that say the red section equals this and the blue section equals that, if people can't tell the blue or the red section, it's not going to be any use for them. So I've got an example here. On the left, there is an accessible graph because it's not relying colour alone to indicate the information. And I would have text underneath to explain the different rates. There's larger font size used. There are data labels attached. It's more accessible. On the right-hand side, the graph relies on colour alone to indicate the information. There are no data labels. You would have to, the data, so a sales diagram, it says, and it says first, second, third and fourth quarters underneath with colour next to them to signify the different sections in the pie chart. And it would need proper big data labels, larger font size. It's an example of something that we do find. It's not going to be particularly helpful to anyone, particularly if you can't see any of those colours or recognise them. Please make sure your hyperlinks are accessible. So as I described before, assistive software, particularly screen readers, creates lists. And from those lists, the user can make choices. So screen readers, it will make a list of hyperlinks. So if my hyperlink says click here and visit this document, and it's used numerous times, I am not going to know what that information is taking me to, what that hyperlink is about. Links need to include a description of what it's about and the destination it's taking you to. If you think about it, if you used a search engine, would you go type the words click here or visit this document? No, you would type the topic that you want to go and look for, because the search engine needs the description of what you want to know about. So I've given an example here. Use this link to find more information on health conditions and health services on the website, or the NHS website has more information on health services and health conditions. You will notice that I have embedded that so that you don't see the full URL. A URL is the address of the web page. The reason that we don't share full URLs is that assistive software will read all of that out and it's intelligible to someone using assistive software. So if you gave me the full one for the NHS, it will read out https://www.nhs.uk/. If it's a really long one, it will give me the full address out of everything. If it's got sequence of numbers and the rest of it, I am going to lose the will to live by the time it's read it all out. You will notice that if you are listening to or watching television programs, they now say, oh, well, they wouldn't give you the full URL. They will go channel4.com, itv.com, bbc.co.uk. They will not give you the full URL, the full address out, because it's not accessible and there's no need for it. And if somebody was going to search for that information, they would be looking for the topic. So we embed links in the main text of your sentences instead of using the URL. If you need to use a full URL because you're printing a document or it's going on a poster or a presentation, then reduce the size. So here I've got nhs.uk or www.nhs.uk, because those are much easier to remember, to put into a search engine. They're easier for everyone. And as I've said here before, make sure you add hyperlinks close to QR codes or contact information, because QR codes not accessible for everyone. Format your tables. Tables are not accessible for a wide range of people. Unfortunately, if you don't format a table, it's not going to work for someone who uses assistive software. If you're using the Microsoft Office package, use the insert table command to create a table, and do not insert a table as an image. The only time I'd ever suggest inserting a table as an image is if it's somebody has created a non-accessible version and there's no way that you can insert it into your document in its format. Save it as an image and then make sure you've got a good description underneath. Don't use split and merge cells, nested tables, or completely blank rows or columns. This is because assistive software needs a logical format. If you don't format it properly, it can't follow the logical 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It will not read the table out. If it's not logical, it won't follow it, which means that it won't work if you don't follow those rules. Make sure there's a unique heading and title for each column in the header or first row of the table. And there's a useful technique. If the table spans multiple pages, the header should be repeated. You can do this by going into the table properties, then row, and checking the repeat as header row option. This will enable you to have your header row automatically repeats itself on a following page if your table moves to the next page. And people might not be aware, but if you can add your alt text to the table properties section, this is useful because you can describe what the table is. So you can say has X amount of rows and X amount of columns, and that enables someone using a screen reader to know if it's going to be a really long table, whether they want to listen to it or not, or whether it's going to be a short one, or helps them know when it's going to finish. Check the reading order of your table. You just press the tab key along to make sure that it reads in a logical order. And if you have a blank cell, put a dash, put a 0, put an NA. It enables assistive software to work more effectively. I've given some examples here of tables that are accessible. So if you weren't aware, the action plan here has a merged cell, one cell instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. My header row is underneath the merged cell, so it's not going to be read out in a logical order. Assistive software needs to go, what will we do? How will we do it? Measures of success, lead, timescale, progress. Then it will read through each of the columns along. It won't repeat the top line. It will just keep going along left to right. If it's suddenly got a blank merged cell, it's not going to read out. It won't know what to do. And to the listener, it will make no sense. So it's really important that we make sure that our tables are logically formatted. Styling text. Aim for short sentences, 15 to 20 words. Avoid abbreviations. Do not use all capital letters, except for things that are recognised, like NHS, ICB, etc. But you also need to make sure that you explain what those are as well. So in our context, if I was going to write ICB, I would also put integrated care board at least once in my document, probably repeated on, if the document is quite long, as I go along, because people don't necessarily read all of a document. They might choose different chapters. Avoid using all capital letters, italics or bold where we can. You can use them. Italics are really not great for readability. If you're referencing in a document, put your references beside the text and embed a link to your source when possible. Having them in footnotes or numbered references, not accessible. Don't use symbols like dashes or asterisks to show either importance of information or additional content, because these are not helpful. Quite often find documents with an asterisk and tiny text at the bottom of a page. it's completely, there's no context for someone using assistive software. It will just randomly read out that this note refers to page 7 of something report, and it will be read after everything else is read out. Glossaries are helpful, but at the start and not the end of a document. Even better, explain as you go along. Never assume everyone knows what you are writing about. Make sure that when you've got a plain language document that you use useful headings, using you and other pronouns to speak to your reader. So you, we would like you to do this and we will do that. Use an active voice, use short sections and short sentences. Use the simplest tense possible, so simple present is the best. Get rid of excess words and use familiar words. Provide explanation of difficult or technical words. One of the things I love about EasyRead, which is a specific format that is primarily used by people with learning difficulties, disabilities, which has images on the left and text, simple text, plain text on the right. If there's a difficult word that has to be used, there is usually an explanation of what that word means. And we should be doing that more in our ordinary documents. Not everyone is familiar with technical words. You can't assume that everyone knows, even in the same organization. Use must to express requirements instead of shall, and make use of accessible lists and tables to simplify complex material. Numbers can be really confusing for lots of people. Now, one of the really useful things that I found out and have found and have used is if you've got a massive £1 million contract that you want to talk about, use the word million rather than 1,000,000, because someone using assistive software like me will just hear lots of zeros. It's also harder to work out if you're not great with numbers. So having 1 million, 2 billion, whatever is much easier. Fractions, be specific. So, and keep it, consistency is key. So if I'm talking about 25% using numbers and a percentage symbol, then in my document, I will stick to using numbers and the percentage symbol. If I'm going to talk about 1/4 or a quarter, then I'm going to stick to using those words. If I'm going to make it really easy for lots of people, sometimes it's easy to say 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 10. It's much easier. Feedback that we've had from people in the learning disability community is it's much easier to understand 1 in 4 people than it is 25% of a person. One of the things that people use a lot when they are for events and describing periods of time is they go from, instead of using from, to, or till, they'll use a dash. So it's really helpful to say the event starts at 10 a.m. and finishes at 3, or the event runs from 10 till 3 rather than 10-3, because my assistive software would just read 10-3, and I'm not quite sure if that's 10 to 3 or what that means. It's really helpful when we are using times to put day, date, month and year. So Friday 24th January 25 is helpful. And if you can avoid using 21st, 22nd, 23rd, the st and erd and ths, because they're not helpful for accessibility and readability. If you're going to save your documents, make sure you save your content accessibly. So when people save from using, and it will apply to anyone using other software packages, when you save, make sure that you have clicked to more options or whatever options other options you've got, and tick the accessibility structure tags box is selected. If you don't tick the select the accessibility check box, all your lovely formatting won't work. So it's really important that you do this. Please note, PowerPoint, Excel and other apps will need editing. using editing software, because none of them will be accessibly formatted when you save to PDF. You will need to double check and do some extra work on them. I can't stress that. If you're going to share a PowerPoint, actually share it as a PowerPoint slide. Make sure it's formatted accessibly. I would recommend the same if you have Excel. If you have an Excel table that you want to share, it's actually easier to take the content and save it as into a accessibly formatted Word table and then format it to PDF. And I have gone over, as I always do with one of these things, but if you include videos, please make sure that you've added captions or subtitles, that you've avoided zooming and flashing image. Make sure that your content makes sense. If you only listen to the audio, is the audio good quality? So you've not got loads of sound effects or loud music, making it more difficult to hear the dialogue. If you have added any additional text in the video, like someone's job title, this will not show up in the subtitles or captions. So have you added this in your dialogue? If you're sharing it on a website or event, have you provided a transcript which includes description of what happens on screen as well as what is said? If the video is an animation, can it be clearly seen? Is the color choice accessible? And are your subtitles big enough for it to be seen if you share it on social media? Do you need to provide a BSL version? Because one of the things that I can tell you is that even if you've created a wonderfully accessibly formatted document, someone might need it in a BSL version in a video. It might make more sense and be more accessible for someone who uses BSL or the sign language to enable them to fully comprehend and understand and appreciate the information that you're sharing. And then I've got some examples here that you can have after that I'm sure we can share of different resources that might be helpful for people.